In practical terms, in your article, you were recommending that voting age should be reduced to 16. Well, here in Nigeria, well, you live in the United States, but here in Nigeria, a 16-year-old will still be considered a child, you know. And
sure.
The Constitution says the age of consent is 18. And then you condemn the geriatric rule. But you talked about our tradition, what fits into our system. But here it's considered, you know, old age is considered synonymous with wisdom. Do you think that these are practical ideas and whether that will solve a problem? Because somebody was saying the other day that even young people in Nigeria are the ones doing 419. It's not that it's not automatic that they are better than those you refer to as geriatrics.
Right, let me tackle those one by one. And I'll start with the last one first by saying that I have ultimate respect for our elders. There's so much wisdom that comes from those who have gone before us, who've experienced the world before us, and there's so much to learn from them. So let me put that point out there. I'll come back to that. The first thing about voting age population, again, I would say that this is not Nigeria specific. You know, in many countries, the age of voting is 18 or older. But I would say that we need to pay particular attention to this, not just in Nigeria, but across the continent of Africa, where you have countries, you know, where the median age essentially is 19 or so, where you're talking about life expectancy that's about 54, and we can talk about exactly what goes into calculating life expectancy. But if you think about it, and then the third thing here is the challenges that we're going to face, whether you're talking about things like climate, migration, etc. Those people who are in their 70s, 80s are not actually going to be the ones who face the aftermath of some of these massive transformations that we're going to see. So why should we say that those people who are younger, who are actually going to spend more time dealing with these challenges, who are going to have to come up with the solutions for these challenges, shouldn't have a say in government now, especially when, and yes, 16 might be a child, but if you think about the amount of pressure that we put on folks who are that age, what's expected of them in terms of their behavior. So many 16-year-olds, younger folks in Nigeria across the country are expected to take on adult tasks. Why should we not have those people then and trust that set of people with the way that with participation in democracy and also governance? So and I believe very strongly in that, again, not just in Nigeria, but around the world. You can't have people who are not going to be here in the next 5, 10, 15 years making decisions that might disrupt the lives of people who will be here for a good 70 years or so. That doesn't seem fair to me and doesn't seem very democratic. And, you know, if you look at the track record over the last, you know, X years or so, I don't necessarily know that with an older crop of leaders, we've necessarily made the wise decisions that will benefit the youth of Nigeria or again, across the continent. So you can't have, whether in Nigeria or the United States or wherever, you can't have a whole set of people shaping the world for them so that they have the most luxurious or beneficial 10, 15 years left in terms of their lives, at the expense of the person who's going to now have to deal with that for, you know, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. It just doesn't seem to work for me. And that's why I argue that you should lower the voting age, increase the number of younger people who are participating in the democracy. And then, you know, like, again, thinking about capping the age for participation in the offices of state so that you're shifting responsibility towards that generation that will actually deal with the challenges.
What are your expectations as Nigeria prepares for another general election?
Sure. I think that it's really important, one, for that people feel safe and able to actually participate in the democracy that we currently have. That's the first thing. People need to feel like they're able to vote. People need to feel like they have a real say in picking the leaders, that it's not a selection, that it actually is an election in the truest sense of the term, right? So that's the first step. So that the second step is that we can actually have some of the real conversations that we need to about how our democracy is structured. As folks will see if they read the piece, I don't necessarily believe that it's structured for the benefit of all Nigerians. But in order to have the conversation about that, we need to have a system at least that is somewhat free, somewhat fair, and that is actually somewhat participatory rather than selective. And I think that's something that we really need to talk about for whatever party it is that comes into power. And that's at the national level, at the subnational level, and of course, right down to the local government levels and structures. That is so important. That participation is so important. And, I think we as citizens of the country need to step up. But at the same time, those who hold office and who are in charge of running these elections need to really think about holding themselves to account, even as we try to hold them to account in that process. And that's what I want for Nigeria. I want, one, for a safe election, but two, also for maximum participation so that we can shift the trajectory of the country.